It is March 1st, and the Gonzaga Bulldogs made a statement. They're going to be dancing in the NCAA tournament.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Friday, happy March 1st, and welcome in to the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by Nissan. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Well, we're going to talk about Gonzaga's win over San Francisco on Thursday evening, whether it cemented a spot for Mark Few's team in the 2024 NCAA tournament. We got that. We're also going to, of course, talk about Gonzaga's big upcoming game on Saturday in Moraga against the Gaels of St. Mary's, what a win looks like for them, what a loss might look like in terms of seeding in the NCAA tournament, and, of course, some keys for Mark Few's team to ensure a victory in that one. But we're starting with the game against the Dons at the Chase Center on Thursday evening. The Zags did not lead until about 3 seconds left in the first half of this game. It was almost exactly when the clock struck midnight on the East Coast for the month of March. As soon as it became March on the East Coast, Mark Few's team said, all right, it is time to go. And the Zags absolutely took it to San Francisco in the second half of this game. For anybody who didn't stay up, who saw that the Zags had a 1-point lead at halftime, who maybe even went to bed before the end of the first half, when Gonzaga did not lead this game at all in the first half, again, until those final 3 seconds. I know some of you went to bed. I know some of you missed the second half of this game. You woke up, you saw Gonzaga's final score was 86-68. You thought, what the heck happened? Graham Ike is what happened, effectively. The things that San Francisco was able to do successfully in the first half, they could not do in the second half. Gonzaga went on a massive run in the first 5 or 6 minutes of the second half, jumped all the way out to that 18, 19, 20, I think at one point, 22-point lead against the Dons, and then played fairly evenly. After that, San Francisco kept the pressure up until the very, very end of the game. We're literally pressuring Joe Few and Luka Krinovich and Colby Brooks at the very last 30 seconds or so of the game. No hate for them on that, but it was a complete destruction for about a 7-minute stretch at the start of the second half, and that was it. It buried the Dons. It put Gonzaga in a position where I think they're going to make the NCAA tournament. We mentioned Graham Ike, 26 points for him, 7 rebounds, 2 blocks. He was 9 of 12 from the field. Basically, nothing went wrong for Graham Ike in this game. He was also 8 of 8 from the free throw line. His development into an elite free throw shooter has been one of the biggest keys for Gonzaga this season, because he not only draws so much contact down on the block, but he converts at an incredibly high rate. I think he's about 80% now on the season from the free throw line. That is tremendous value for Gonzaga to have in their big man, who takes up so many touches on the block for this team. Nolan Hickman had 22 points. I believe all, if not most, of those points came in the second half of this one as well. 7 of 13 from the field, 2 of 6 from 3. He was also 6 of 6 from the free throw line. And look, I know some people still think if Gonzaga loses to St. Mary's on Saturday, and we are going to talk more about that game, of course, or if they don't succeed in the WCC tournament, or even if both those things happen, that Gonzaga has some serious risk of not making the NCAA tournament. And yes, to an extent, there's a chance they'll be pretty darn sweaty on Selection Sunday. But in my mind, this win over a quad one opponent by 18 points has done enough to put Gonzaga into the NCAA tournament field of 68, regardless of what happens for the rest of the year. Currently, as we're recording this Friday morning, Gonzaga is 19th in the net. 19th. No top 30 team has ever been left out of the NCAA tournament. Top 30 team. And yes, the net hasn't been around that long. And so those numbers maybe, there's not a big enough sample size necessarily to have a huge conversation about that. But No team out of the top 30. Gonzaga's in the top 20. And I think the concern is like, well, yeah, but if they lose, they'll drop. Maybe. I mean, they'll probably drop a little bit, but we're talking about a loss to St. Mary's. They lose to St. Mary's. They're not dropping from 19 to 30. They might drop from 19 to 22, 21. I mean, if they get blown out, maybe they'll drop to like 23. I don't think they're going to get blown out. Then, yes, maybe they go play San Francisco again in the second round or in the semifinal round of the WCC tournament. Maybe it's Santa Clara. Maybe they lose that game. Again, I don't think they're falling that far, depending how those games go, of course. There is the remote possibility that Gonzaga gets crushed by St. Mary's and then gets, something weird happens in like LMU or somebody who's a kind of an ugly quad 3 game makes it to that semifinal game and beats Gonzaga, and then their resume looks bad. That is a remote possibility. But what I see is a team that at this point, barring a catastrophe, they're in 19th in the net. They're 17th in KenPom right now. I know KenPom isn't usually treated as a huge measuring stick by the selection committee, but it has some merit, and certainly being 17th is a pretty significant number for the Zags. They're now 2-5 in those quad 1 games. They're 2-1 in those quad 2 games, and they are 18-0 otherwise. I think 5-0 quad 3, 13-0 in those quad 4 games. Here's the deal. Last night, USC and Washington State played each other. Washington State narrowly escaped with the victory. USC is now 101st in the net ranking. They need to be top 100 for Gonzaga's win over USC from back in December to move from a quad 3 win to a quad 2 win. If USC had won that game, they almost certainly would be in that quad 2 conversation. Gonzaga would then be 2-5 in quad 1 and 3-1 in quad 2. Not a huge difference, but it matters. It helps. So I believe USC is playing Washington on Saturday, kind of a conflicting game for Gonzaga. We also would like Washington to stay higher in the net than they currently are. But if USC is able to move into the top 100, that is an extra little bonus for Gonzaga. But again, the Zags have one game left, and it's against St. Mary's. They're 15th in the net. If Gonzaga and St. Mary's play a close game and Gonzaga loses, their net ranking probably doesn't get impacted at all. They would still be 23-7. They'd still be top 25 with the net, maybe top 20 still. If they lose a close game, they might only drop to 20. It depends what those teams around them do. So we're talking about a top 25 team in the net, top 20-ish team at KenPom, 23-7 on the season. Yeah, 2-6 in quad 1. It's not great. It's not great. But also, if the rest of your metrics are good, I just don't see that being a problem. Certainly losing all 3 games to St. Mary's would not be ideal. You lose to them in Spokane, which already happened. You lose to them in Moraga, and then you lose to them in the WCC Championship. 0-3 against St. Mary's is definitely going to impact the committee's decision. But if they obviously they already took care of San Francisco. If they take care of San Francisco or Santa Clara again in that semifinal game, I still think they're probably going to get in. And of course, we know they're getting that double bye in that WCC tournament because this was the game they needed to win in order to do that, and they did it. So they're going to get that double bye. I think they're in a position right now where, again, barring some kind of pretty significant catastrophe, I think the Zags are going to be dancing. Now, we had our top 5 keys to victory for Gonzaga in this game against San Francisco. I'm just going to rapid fire through them before we get you ready for that St. Mary's game on Saturday. One of the big keys was winning the battle on the boards. San Francisco was +10, I believe, last time, or +9. Gonzaga was +9 in this one. The Dons did have 11 offensive boards, 8 of them coming from Jonathan Mobo. Really good performance from him on the offensive glass, but Gonzaga ultimately won the battle on the boards and won the game. Key number 2 was Graham Ike dominating Jonathan Mobo. Check. 26 points again on 9 of 12 shooting. Mobo was better in this game than he was last time. He had 14 points on 4 of 9 shooting. He also had those 11 rebounds and 3 assists, but his 4 of 9 from the free throw line could not help San Francisco by getting to the free throw line and converting there. Key number 3 was a big game from the bench. Dusty Strummer had 4 points and 6 rebounds. He was 1 of 1 from the field, knocked down both of his free throws as well. He did have 3 turnovers, but ultimately I thought this was another really nice game from Dusty. The offensive move he did to get a bucket was one of the smoothest moves I've ever seen from him. His rebounding was once again a huge part of this game. Braden Huff didn't do much. He only had 5 minutes of playing time, and he got 3 fouls in this one. He did have 4 points on 2 of 3 shooting, but Huff has struggled against San Francisco, and he struggled against St. Mary's, so we'll see what he's able to bring for the Zags on Saturday. Key number 4 was to convert at the free throw line. Check. 23 of 28 for the Zags in this one. That's 82%. That also does include the 2 misses by Colby Brooks in the final 30 seconds of this game. If you take those out, since it was effectively significant garbage time, that would be 23 of 26. Really, really good performance from the Zags at the free throw line in this one. And then key number 5 was to take advantage of the pro Zags crowd. From the broadcast, it was definitely a lot of Gonzaga fans there. You could hear both sides cheering pretty aggressively. Obviously, the first half was a lot louder for the Dons because they were playing a lot better. And by the time Gonzaga I think Sean Fleming, one of the two of them said it best, like, there are still fans coming back to their seats with 14 minutes left in the second half who had just finally gotten their food. And they're like, what in the heck happened? Because it was a 1-point lead and they get back and it's a 20-point game. So I think that just sucked the life out of that stadium in an incredible way and it allowed Gonzaga to really coast for the rest of that second half into an easy victory. Well, the Zags now turn their attention to St. Mary's on Saturday. This is a top 25 matchup, and the Zags could spoil a perfect season for the Gaels. We got more on all of that after a word from today's sponsor, Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things just a little bit further? You ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. And if you need something, you can call on the class-exclusive built-in Google Assistant. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and the Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch touchscreen infotainment system. And the 2024 Rogue is the perfect mid-size crossover for your next adventure. Or how about the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder, which has room for up to 8, an expansive cargo capacity, and advanced available 4x4 capability. With 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds of towing capacity, when adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. All right, folks, segment 2. Still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we're getting you ready for the Big Kahuna Saturday night, 7 p.m. Pacific time. The Gonzaga Bulldogs will be in Moraga, California, taking on the Gaels of St. Mary's. That game will be on ESPN. Our boys Fleming and Farnham will be on the call for that one. And it is another matchup between 2 ranked opponents here, between the Zags and the Gaels. Gonzaga currently 23rd in the AP poll. St. Mary's is at 17. It's always fun when this game happens regardless, but it is always even more fun when both these teams are in the top 25, an occurrence we have seen quite a bit over the last 5 or 6 years or so, and a huge testament to the work that both Randy Bennett and Mark Few have done to have these programs consistently in that conversation. Obviously, the Zags dropped the last one. 64-62 was the final score in that one. The Zags shot 3 of 14 from 3 in that game. They also only shot 43.5% overall. That's what St. Mary's does. They play good defense. They force tough shots. They control the basketball, control the tempo, control the pace, and make things really difficult for opposing teams. Anton Watson and Graham Ike both had double-doubles in this game. Ben Gregg also had 10 rebounds in this one as well. There was some controversial officiating. That was kind of the big story coming out of that game. Some late game stuff, a missed out of bounds call, a questionable foul call on Anton Watson, some student section throwing stuff onto the floor, which didn't look particularly good for Gonzaga. There was a lot of conversation around that at the time, but ultimately, as much as the officiating down the stretch was problematic, and it wasn't necessarily blatantly against Gonzaga. It was bad officiating. They missed the no call out of bounds. They couldn't really control the game very well. It was a messy game, but Gonzaga didn't convert when they needed to. They didn't make the shots they needed to make. They had defensive lapses in this game in particular, and it cost them. They are more than capable of beating St. Mary's. Absolutely 100% capable of beating St. Mary's. And we'll talk about what they need to do that to close out the show. But ultimately, this was a game where Gonzaga did not play their best. And yet they still came within a possession of winning this basketball game. And again, some of you will say, well, if the officials had gotten that call right, maybe, and maybe you're right. Maybe that would have changed the tide of that game. I also saw them miss a bunch of shots in the first half. I saw Braden Huff come in and give up 6 points in about 45 seconds of action to Mitchell Saxon. And those were the things in my mind kind of cost them the game, and things that need to be improved between now and then. The 3-point shooting obviously has been an area of inconsistency for Gonzaga, let's put it that way, this season, and it's certainly been much better as of late. Same with the free throw shooting. I think if those things show that improvement in a pretty tough road environment against the Gaels on Saturday, they should be able to get a victory. Here's what this game means effectively for both sides right now. St. Mary's currently 15-0 in the WCC. They crushed Pepperdine on Thursday. Marcelonis had 17 points and 11 assists because he has been playing some absolutely fantastic basketball as of late. They did not have Joshua Jefferson. He is out for the season. He will not play on Saturday against the Zags. They also did not have backup center Henry Wessels. As I'm recording right now, I did not see an official update on whether Wessels will play on Saturday against Gonzaga or not. That would be a big loss for them. He's not a particularly highly impactful player, but he is crucial depth in the front court. And with Jefferson being out, with Mason Forbes being asked to step into that starting lineup, they just don't have a lot of depth behind Mitchell Saxon, behind Mason Forbes. Wessels not going would be even less depth for them, would put some pressure on those guys to stay on the floor, not commit fouls, et cetera, et cetera. St. Mary's 24-6 on the season, 15-0 in the WCC. No Gonzaga team has swept the WCC regular season since Pepperdine did it in 1992, back when Doug Christie was on the team. That is the last time a non-Gonzaga team has swept the WCC. Gonzaga, for the record, has done it 6 times. 6 times in that period of time. Of course, all of them coming in the Mark Few era. 6 of those times. St. Mary's, despite their success, despite being a 5 seed multiple times recently, despite continually being a top 25 team, they have yet to do this. That's what's at stake. They want that regular season sweep. How could they not? It's an incredible accomplishment. They totally should want that. Gonzaga, they want nothing more than to spoil it. They want to be the only team that's done it. I don't think Mark Few's sitting here thinking like, oh, nobody's done it since 1992. Like, he didn't care about it that much. But you can bet he knows. He knows that they're the only team that's done this in a really long time. He doesn't want them to do it. No, but Anton Watson doesn't want them to do it like this team. They don't want them to get that done. Gonzaga wants to win this game for a lot of reasons. Obviously, we laid out a bunch of them before. But this is going to be a game that both teams really, really want to pick up. St. Mary's right now is 20th at KenPom. They are adjusted offensive efficiency at 45, adjusted defensive efficiency at 13. Comparing that to Gonzaga is proof of why this is going to be a really fascinating game. The Zags are 17th at KenPom, so 3 spots higher than St. Mary's. Their adjusted offensive efficiency is 10th, and their adjusted defensive efficiency is 53rd. So as a reminder, that means Gonzaga's offense is 10th compared to the 13th ranked defense at St. Mary's, while St. Mary's offense is 45th compared to the 53rd ranked defense for the Zags. Sounds like that's going to be a battle brewing in Moraga on Saturday. And look, here's what this game is going to mean for seeding for Gonzaga. We'll use what Joe Lenardi said on the broadcast yesterday and kind of give you my read on where I think the various situations that could play out the rest of the season are going to mean for the Zags. If the Zags win this game and they win in Vegas, no more losses until they get into the NCAA tournament. Beat St. Mary's, beat whoever it is, San Francisco, Santa Clara in the semifinal game, beat St. Mary's again in the WCC championship. I think the Zags get a 6 seed. I think after all the strife, all the consternation, if the Zags go on a 3-game winning streak from here on out, they're a 6 seed in the NCAA tournament, maybe a 7 seed, but I think they could realistically be a 6 seed. If the Zags win and then they lose in the WCC title game, so they win this game, they win the semifinal game, they lose to St. Mary's in Vegas, I think they're maybe still a 7 seed if they get that done, but they could also fall into that dreaded 8-9 category, which is just not what you want. You got to face a 1 seed in the second round. Maybe you get Arizona or whoever that last 1 seed is, perhaps a more vulnerable team. I don't love Gonzaga's matchup against UConn or Houston or even Purdue, although I think Purdue is potentially beatable, but that would be where I think the Zags would fall if they win this game, lose in the WCC title game. If the Zags win this game and then also lose in the first WCC playoff game, lose to San Francisco, lose to Santa Clara, then I think you're probably almost certainly in that 8-9 territory, maybe even fall down in that 10 territory, maybe even into that play-in. But I think if you beat St. Mary's on Saturday, you probably avoid the play-in, even if the worst case scenario happens after that. And then if the Zags lose, that's when things get a little dicier. I still think they're in, but if the Zags lose this game and win in Vegas, then I think you're probably a 7 seed, maybe an 8-9 seed. Winning in Vegas is critical. You do that, you probably keep yourself at a decent seed in the NCAA tournament. Certainly you're not in the play-in game, at least, if you avoid that. If the Zags win and lose in the WCC title, or excuse me, if the Zags lose and also lose in the WCC title game, then I think you're looking at maybe a 10 seed that's like one of the last four in, maybe even an 11 seed in the play-in game. But I think if you lose this game and you then win your next game and you lose in the WCC title game again, that's 0-3 against St. Mary's. Possibility that's kind of where you're in your tenuous. It's maybe a play-in game situation or maybe a 10 seed. And then, of course, the worst case scenario, the Zags lose on Saturday and then they lose that first WCC game. If it's to San Francisco or Santa Clara, you're going to be sweating on Selection Sunday. I still think the Zags would probably get at least a play-in game, but you'd be sweating it out. If, again, the absolute drop-dead worst-case scenario, Gonzaga gets beat badly by St. Mary's on Saturday, somebody like LMU or Pepperdine or Portland is the team you play in that semifinal game, and somehow you lose to that team, some ugly quad 3 loss. That would be the worst-case scenario, and I think it's possible if that happened that Gonzaga would be left out. I still think there's a chance they'd get a play-in game if that happened, but that would be the worst case scenario. I don't expect that to happen, but clearly based on this layout here, Gonzaga winning on Saturday against St. Mary's puts them in a position where they are pretty darn comfortable heading into Las Vegas in the WCC tournament. So what do they need to do? What do they need to do to win this game? We're going to talk about what that looks like for the Zags, what they can do to spoil this perfect season for the Gaels in Moraga. Coming up after a word from today's sponsor, FanDuel. Folks, get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 in your pocket if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite Zags and the NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Right now, Mark Few's team is 900-1 odds to win it all. And look, it's a little far-fetched. I'll admit it, this isn't the season where you think they're going to get it done, but we've always kind of thought that Mark Few's team is going to get it done in a year where nobody expects it. And if you believe that the slippers still fits for this little team in Spokane, Washington, a $5 bet net you $450 if they get it done. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, folks, closing out the show today, talking 5 keys to victory for the Gonzaga Bulldogs on Saturday night, 7 p.m. on ESPN in Moraga against the Gaels of St. Mary's. Key number 1, as it so often is when you play this St. Mary's team, don't let them dictate the pace. Now, that is much easier said than done. I can say that here from the friendly confines of my office. But for Gonzaga to do that in Moraga against this team, it is a huge challenge. We have seen the Zags attempt to get out in transition more in recent games. Now, they didn't do it a ton against against San Francisco, in part because San Francisco aggressively got back on defense and was really, you could see the amount of times where Gonzaga tried. A long rebound or a rebound that bounced out, they kick it to Nembhard. He turns, he takes 3 aggressive dribbles and then stops and slows it down because he realizes it's 2-on-4, it's 3-on-5, whatever it may be. They just didn't have the numbers. And, shout out to Nembhard for recognizing that and not forcing it into bad situations. He had 6 turnovers against San Francisco, which was uncharacteristic for him, but it was some of them were bad passes, but it wasn't as much of him trying to force things in transition that weren't there. I think he's got a pretty good read and handle on that. St. Mary's going to do the same. They're not going to let Gonzaga get out in transition. They're going to force their offensive possessions to take as long as possible. They themselves are going to take as long as they can on offense. If Gonzaga can get some transition points, can put pressure on St. Mary's. St. Mary's depth is questionable right now. Gonzaga's questionable depth has been an issue for them all season long, but they're kind of in a better spot with that, with Krajinovic healthy, with Strummer and Huff playing a little bit better as of late. And, of course, St. Mary's depth issues are more recent because of the loss to Jefferson, the potential absence of Henry Wessels in this game as well. So for Gonzaga, trying to push the pace as much as possible, making it so that if St. Mary's is going to slow Gonzaga down, they have to work hard to do it. Make them work hard to slow Gonzaga down. Because even if that means they do set the pace, it means eventually you're wearing them down. Gonzaga's won a lot of games by just out-athleting the other team, by just wearing them down. In the last 10 minutes, that team just doesn't have the horses to hang with them. Gonzaga has won games like that. This year, that's been harder because of the lack of depth, but they have been better at it lately. It's kind of what they did against San Francisco. I think there's a chance they can do it here against St. Mary's. Key number 2 is to stretch the floor and shoot it well from beyond the arc. 3 of 14 last time out. Not a good percentage, obviously, but also it's not like they took 30 of them or 25 of them or even 20 of them. They only took 14 threes. They didn't try to force it to be a big part of the game. I don't think they should do that here, but when you get good looks, you got to knock them down because you will eventually. St. Mary's not a perfect defensive team, and even perfect defensive teams, sometimes the best strategy is to leave people open for 3. If Ryan Nembhard comes off a screen and he's got an open look from 3, he's got to take it. And I will continue to give credit to Nembhard because I think his shot selection is a pretty big strength of his. Early in the year, even when he was bricking threes at a 15% clip, I don't think his shot selection was all that bad. And now I think his shot selection has even improved, and his ability to make the shots has also improved, which is obviously a big part of that conversation as well. But since Gonzaga's lost St. Mary's, they have shot 41% from 3, 40.8% from 3. If you take out their 4 of 18 game against Kentucky, 61 of 112 from 3 for Gonzaga against WCC teams. That's 54.5%. This team has been absolutely blistering hot from 3 since that loss to St. Mary's back in early February. If they can continue that, and it's not easy. Gonzaga played Portland in that stretch. They played LMU in that stretch. They played teams that are pretty bad defensively. St. Mary's is not that team, but Gonzaga has more confidence coming into this game from beyond the arc. And I think being able to stretch the floor, pull those big men away from the rim, those guys are going to have to play 35, 38 minutes, especially if Wessels is out. Pull those guys away from the rim. Ben Gregg put pressure on them by shooting threes. Anton Watson put pressure on them. Braden Huff put pressure on them. I don't need Ike out there. I know he can knock them down, but he's better served being down on the block. But for Gonzaga, put some pressure on those bigs, pull them away from the rim, stretch that defense as thin as you can. And when you get that good looks, knock them down. Key number 3, Zags need a monster game from Anton Watson. He is your senior leader. He is your 5th-year player. He is the guy who, when the team is on their back, and they need somebody to carry them to a victory, to secure their spot at the NCAA tournament, that is who you look to. Graham Ike is, in my opinion, the front runner for Player of the Year. He has been since the beginning of the WCC season. Some of you have questioned if I still have Graham Ike at the top. Definitively, after his game against San Francisco, I say, yes, I do. It's unquestionable in my mind, especially after his dominance of Jonathan Mobo, that he is the WCC Player of the Year. But Anton Watson is the most important player on Gonzaga's roster. He is their leader. He is their emotional leader, their vocal leader, their lead by example player. And he needs to go out and dominate because Joshua Jefferson's not playing. Joshua Jefferson's a very good defensive player. So is Mason Forbes. Mason Forbes is a good athlete, a good player. I'm not trying to discredit him at all. But Watson could have his Santa Clara UCLA type game where he drops 30. Ideally, somebody else steps up. And it's not just Anton Watson like it was in those games. But if he can create his own shot, if he can find ways to get buckets on broken plays, which happens against St. Mary's, that is a huge, huge advantage for Gonzaga. I think if you ask St. Mary's fans, you ask my friend Zach Farmer, the host of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast, he's going to say Anton Watson's the key in this game, not Graham Ike. I almost guarantee it. And I think he's right. And I think I'm right. I think it's Anton Watson who is the most important player in this game, particularly for Gonzaga, but really in totality in this game. Key number 4 is a big game from Gonzaga's bench. Braden Huff arguably cost Gonzaga the game the last time. He gave up points immediately. He was barely playable. They had to play Graham Ike pretty much the entire game. Randy Bennett's going to do that again. As soon as Braden Huff comes in the game, they're going to attack him on the defensive end of the floor. They're going to make him play defense. They're going to make him commit fouls. They're going to try to get him out of the game immediately. And it might work, because it's worked against Braden Huff in the past. But if he can find a way to hold his ground, to not give up points right away, to not commit stupid fouls, and to score his points on the offensive end of the floor, that swings the momentum in that situation, in that substitution pattern where Braden's on the floor. If Gonzaga can win that period of time where Graham Ike is sitting, monumental for the Zags. Meanwhile, Dusty Strummer been absolutely cooking as of late. His defense, his rebounding in particular, his floor spacing, knocking down open threes, being more confident driving to the basket, tenacious offensive rebound, was very physical, getting defensive rebounds as well. If he can be that player, they don't need him to play 25 minutes, 28 minutes, 32 minutes. They need him to play like 12 minutes of really good basketball, 16 minutes maybe. Going out there, getting rebounds, knocking down open shots. If he can be that player for Gonzaga in this game, that's a huge benefit as well. And again, Nembhard and Hickman were able to get breaks against San Francisco. They didn't have to play the full 40 because of Luka Krajinovic, because of the margin of victory for the Zags. If Krajinovic can spell these guys in this game as well, that's a big boost. Getting some minutes from him. He doesn't need to come out and be dominant. He just needs to come out and play quality defense, not give up easy shots, and not turn the basketball over on the other end. If he can do that for a few minutes, having Nembhard and Hickman a little bit fresher for the end of this game, because it's probably going to come down to the wire. If they've got those two guys fully healthy, more close to 100% ready to go, that's a big boost as well. And then finally, key number 5, draw contact, convert at the free throw line. Since the loss to St. Mary's, because that was 11 of 15 in that game from the free throw line. So it's not like they really struggled in a significant way from the charity stripe. But since that game, Gonzaga has shot 82% from the free throw line this season. 82%. They have been lights out from the free throw line. For Gonzaga, not only converting at the free throw line, which is always tough to do in a hostile road environment, but also getting those players in foul trouble. Make Mitchell Saxon sit early. Do you know how important that could be to Gonzaga in this game? Again, I've mentioned it a handful of times. It depends on if Henry Wessels plays. If Mitchell Saxon's on the bench and Henry Wessels is playing, Gonzaga has a huge advantage. If Mitchell Saxon's on the bench and Henry Wessels isn't suited up, they have an even bigger advantage, massive advantage at that point. So I think for Gonzaga, that's a key. And Saxon is very good at not committing fouls. He's very good at using his size, his verticality to prevent getting fouls. This is not an easy task. It's easier against San Francisco. San Francisco's bigs aren't as disciplined. They committed fouls in situations they shouldn't have, cost themselves playing time, and ultimately led to a big Gonzaga victory. St. Mary's is more disciplined than that. I don't think it'll be easy. But if Graham Ike can get Saxon underneath him, get his hands up, force him to commit a foul, that is going to be vital for the Zags. You'd also love to see Ike go 8-8 from the free throw line again if he could. That certainly doesn't help, doesn't hurt either. This is going to be an absolute blast of a basketball game. It's going to be stressful. It'd be a whole heck of a lot more stressful if Gonzaga hadn't just blown the doors off San Francisco. It is unbelievably critical that they were able to get that win in the way that they did. This is going to be a really, really fun, high-level, top 25 basketball game on Saturday, and I cannot wait to watch it. If you want to join us, join the Discord channel. It is free. There's a link in your show notes on audio and video platforms. We're hanging out all game long talking. We'll be talking through the pregame as well. Definitely join us there. We will be back on Monday with a recap of that game, some mailbag questions as well, getting you ready for the WCC tournament coming up that week. Thanks again to all of you who have made this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Have a fantastic weekend. Happy March. And until Monday, as always, go Zags.